So we're going to commence this meeting here today. And again, let me thank the members of the press for coming, and of course all the citizens and residents of Air County for coming. A group of people for several years have been warning the public about the profound perils of the CPV project. We've brought internationally renowned scientists here. We've had medical persons come to meetings and testify in court proceedings where there was no opposition to their testimony from the district attorney's office. We've had common citizens like us coming repeatedly on Saturdays and demonstrating. And our principal points have been, number one, that we know the externalities of this project will be devastating to the local communities and individual people. And number two, we fundamentally believe that the approval process was corrupted. Pramilla Malick, who's sitting to my left, has been speaking and leading in this issue. Many other people have been speaking in this regard and saying these basic points. Now, we're at a point where it's time for government to function. It's time for government to function on many issues in our society, but this is one of them. And the people in this county are frankly sick and tired of the business as usual that's going on here. That is lip service and no substantive action. For those of you who don't know, and I know everyone in this room knows, there was a conviction a year and a half ago with regard to bribery in CPV. A gentleman pled guilty. His name is Howe. When you plead guilty, that's the same as being convicted. I understand Steve Newhouse may not understand that. That's true. Check with the county attorney. So to make the claim that we will wait until someone is convicted with regard to the bribery and the extortion and the nonsense is idiocy. We have known for several years now that the process by which this project got approved was profoundly corrupted. What we don't know is the extent of that corruption. And the reason we don't know that is because we have lazy people who are supposed to be investigating issues like this in the public interest and are instead doing whatever they're doing. But it isn't this, and this is of profound importance to this county and this set of communities. So Eric Schneiderman, a good friend of mine, get off your duff, get your investigators down to Orange County, subpoena the records of everyone on that board and everybody at CPV, and find out what happened. Because we know, those of us who paid a little attention to this, that there was some critical thinking going on in that planning board at a moment in time, just like in the Legoland case. And then suddenly, the person who was engaged in that critical thinking was no longer on the planning board. We know that happened. It's a fact. We don't know what consideration, other than the general bribery, which a company like CPV brings to the table, which is all of the employment they're going to produce, a total of maybe 20 full-time jobs. We're laughing about it. You get more employment decommissioning and deconstructing the plant than anything else. Okay? Now, Shoreham sets an example. Mario Cuomo said about Shoreham that it was in essence, it's too dangerous to open. His son should be saying the exact same thing about this facility. No holds barred. No excuses, no equivocation. No, I'm running for this, I'm running for that. I don't care what you're running for. Time's up. Time's up for the families in our county. Now, we got a whiff of this in the last few weeks. And people who literally were living around the corner from the facility were in this office, sitting right around here 2 Sundays ago, telling me they barely knew what was being constructed. They didn't know, they never knew. Then there was a jet engine in their kitchen, in their bedroom. That's what they told me. And I heard man sat right here with his machine, his phone, playing the sound. And that's what it sounded like in his living room in his bedroom. His wife told me we had nowhere to sleep. So these sorts of externalities are not transient. This is what's going to be going on at that facility in one or another way. You may have chemical releases that don't have quite the odor, but they have profound toxicity. They have profound impacts on public health. The scientists have told us this already. We don't have to wait to see it happen. We don't have to wait for people's lives to be further destroyed and property values and all the rest of it. So this is what I'm saying very clearly. Steve Newhouse, I didn't run against you. You ran, you won. God bless you. But here's the deal. Don't go around talking about now pull the permits, go into court, use your parents' patriae authority in the interests, the health and safety interests of this community, and try to get an injunction on behalf of the people. That's what you're there for. You're not there to serve anybody else, yourself. You're secondary. It's not about personality. It's about function. Your function is to serve the people. Serve the people. Stop making excuses. Stop saying it. The gentleman wrote a letter last week that appeared in the Chronicle. The county has nothing to do with this. The county should have everything to do with it. It's in the county. What do you have a county executive for if not to advocate for the citizens and people in the county? What is he there for? He's not there to go to a bunch of photo ops. He's not there to advance his own political agendas. That's not what he's there for. Those are personal matters, but they don't serve the people necessarily. So I think that there's a level of anger that we, those of us who've been opposing this plan, have to begin manifesting. I'm furious because I know that that plan did not get a thorough review. I'm positive of it. I know that in thousands of pages of documents, the word fracked natural gas never really appears. And there's no study of the inducing effects of this plant in Pennsylvania under a theory that people there don't matter. They do matter. We all matter. There's no indication that anybody really studied the effect of the distribution pipelines, which we know have profound effects on habitats. We don't have to make this up. We know it. Science is out there. We can no longer live simply with alternative facts. So we have to be angry because our elected officials have been quiescent, would be a kind word for it. Accommodating would be a kind word for it. Prostituting themselves might be a better word for it. And time is up for all of them. And it has nothing to do with political party. Nothing whatsoever. Now, one last comment, and then I'm going to turn this over to Pramilla. We note in a hotly contested election in Orange County, maybe 40% of the people vote. Right? Maybe 45 if it gets really hot. We have to ask ourselves, why do people not participate in the process? People apparently understand that whoever they elect is not really serving their interests. And it's in a way a waste of time. It's like a realm for other people to play games in. But it's not something which is going to forward their lives. So what we're ending up with is a hollow democracy. And it's because of the unresponsiveness and lack of courage of our elected officials. That's why we have a hollow democracy. And again, because it crosses party lines, people have essentially nowhere to turn. And because the system is structured so as to defeat third parties, we especially have nowhere to turn. So this goes to some profound issues. This is not just about this one project, although it's profound enough in terms of its potential health and safety effects. But it's about the nature of a democratic society and politicians who keep giving lip service but not taking actions within their realm. So the governor, permits, goodbye. Goodbye. You got permits in a corrupted manner at a state level. Attorney General, start investigating what went on locally. We know already about Percoco. We've known that for quite a while. How did this project get approved? And while you're at it, come over to Goshen, and let's look at Legoland as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Large corporations that have a lot of money to spend, both on publicity, and all of us have gotten repeatedly the glossy stuff from Legoland, and we've seen in the newspaper the full-page advertisements for CPV updating the community with a lot of nonsense. We understand they can outspend us. We get that point. It's obvious. But that doesn't mean that what they say over and over again is true. A councilman from Goshen spoke with me last night, and this is what he told me, because it really epitomizes the point. He said to me, I live in Arcadia Hills, and you know who I'm talking about. He should speak for himself, and I'm sure he will. And he said the following: I was told in all the meetings that I wouldn't have any real impact on the forests here. I look out across the way, there wouldn't be any real impact. They're leaving most of the forests. He says, I can now look and I can see the Episcopal Church tower here, and I can see Goshen from where I am. I don't want to see Goshen from where I am, he said to me. So basically what it comes down to is those proponents of projects inherently are going to misrepresent the projects. That's why there's a review process. Why would they misrepresent the project? So they can get approvals and not concern the public with the real ramifications of their projects. That's inherent. It's logical to assume that. And it's also logical to assume that a company that was willing to corrupt people at the highest level of our state was willing to do that anywhere and everywhere it was necessary. Whether we could prove it or not today isn't the point. We don't have the resources to investigate that. That's why we have district attorneys. That's why we have state attorneys. That's why we pay them. So it's their turn. And Steve Newhouse, it's your turn. Be in court tomorrow and try to stop this from proceeding. Make the argument that there was fraud against the public interest. Don't rely on me to make all the arguments for you. Okay? It's your turn. You have a county attorney's office, you have 30 attorneys. Get them working on this case as a priority. Don't tell us you have a million other things to do, because you know something? There's nothing more important to do right now in our county than to stop this project and to get accountability.
Yeah.
Nothing. And the people who are thinking that by a soundbite we're going away, we're not going away because CPV isn't going away. We can't go away. How can we go away? Where are we going to go? Farmers can't go anywhere. This is where their land is. So it's an emotional issue, and it's an issue that should engender anger in us and in many others. I introduced Pramilla Malick, whose courage and has been wonderful in this, persistent, and thank her. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Michael. Your support over these many years. You were the lone person that listened to us, that paid attention to what we were saying. I want to say that, well, justice may have been served to Joseph Percoco. Justice has yet not been served to the people of Orange County.
Yep. Yes.
And it will not have been served until this plant is shut down and we are made whole again. And to the public at large, justice will not be served until we know what transpired in those secret meetings. What were those private email conversations? What did they really include? And I'm not talking about just between Howe and Percoco and Kelly. I'm talking about the email exchanges with state officials and Percoco and Howe and Kelly. Mm-hmm. I mean, we do feel vindicated, however, because we tried to sound the alarm for years, both about the pollution as well as about the corruption. Mm-hmm. And it's really only because of the persistence of so many people here, members of Protect Orange County that refused to surrender, refused to walk away, and let innocent casualties occur. And there are members of our group who actually did leave, but they created a body of work that we still rely on today. And so I thank and applaud all of those hardworking residents of this county who had to do the work of the regulatory agencies, who had to do the work of the investigative agencies, who had to do the work, quite frankly, also of the media. But finally, this trial has, shed daylight on the dirty dealings that we had always sensed. The project was built on a house of cards, and a house of lies. Michael referred to some of those early planning board minutes and the need to have an investigation right at the local level. I was trying to pull up those planning board minute quotes, and I will happily send them to anyone in the media who wants them. I couldn't put them up, but I'm paraphrasing. In 2009, members of the planning board said, okay, we're going to issue this permit as a favor to you, CPV, because you need to meet some application deadline. But we all understand this EEIS is not complete at all. It's inadequate. You have the planning board chair saying, we accepted this, but we really shouldn't have accepted this. There was a clear element of coercion there. There were statements by planning board members saying, the public had a right to know the answers to these questions and these issues. Do we have some legal liability here? And we would say, yes, there is legal liability here. And why is that relevant? Because all subsequent permits, every single one that came after, even the FERC permit for the Valley Lateral Pipeline, is based on that initial 2009 DEIS. When CPV came in and said, you know what, just pass this along as a favor to us, and we'll come back and we'll do a complete environmental review later. And they fell for that. But you know what? Right afterwards, they fired all of the consultants. They changed the planning board chair and members of the planning board, and they never did that supplemental EIS. Never, ever. And then every permit afterwards was based upon that. Now the DEC, they understand environmental law. They know that permit was based on the 2009 DEIS. So it was really disappointing, disturbing that our environmental laws were not protected. And people are paying the price. There's another thing I would point to. And I sat at the trial pretty much every day, so I'll answer questions about the trial, specific to the trial later. But the trial revealed that the relationship between Percoco and Kelly, and the hefty campaign donations and the deep sea fishing trips and the bonding experience all began in 2010. Now the reason that's significant is in 2009, the DEC, when they received the DEIS, they said, okay, well and good, but we think there should be a Department of Health evaluation of this project. And 2010 came, and the relationship, quote unquote, began, and the great friendship, as Judge Caproni joked, we know it was love at first sight, but then all of the permits were issued, and that Department of Health evaluation never occurred. And somebody needs to explain whether that relationship had something to do with the fact that that Department of Health evaluation never occurred. And they received air permits after that. They received water permits after that. And we warned everybody, all of our regulatory agencies and our elected officials, that there would be health impacts. And what did you see when CPV fired up? People from 10, 15 miles away with burning eyes, burning noses, burning throats, waking up in the middle of the night saying, I can't breathe. We will not have justice until we can all breathe in peace in Orange County, until we can all live in peace in Orange County. And I also want to say, Cuomo's response to this was, he feels sorry for Joseph Percoco's 2 girls. What about the children of Orange County? Does he have any sympathy or empathy for what they're suffering? I mean, we received an email from a family who was just driving by the plant, just driving by for a few minutes, and their little daughter's eyes started burning up. And, we can't live like this. We all know this. And with the frack gas, there's still going to be impacts. That's documented now. The Concerned Citizens, Concerned Health Professionals of New York State just issued a new compendium, which really focuses on the health impacts of frack gas infrastructure. So, we appeal to Governor Cuomo now. He says he has nothing to do with this. I would say the more he delays in shutting down this power plant, the more complicit he appears. And I also want to say that, unfortunately, the real sharks in this scheme are still swimming near our shores. And that is CPV and other beneficiaries. And we cannot forget that the money that Lisa Percoco received did not come from Braith Kelly's personal pocket. It came from the company. It came from CPV. And in an email exchange between Kelly and another CPV employee and the president of the company, Doug Egan, one of the employees raised red flags and says, why is this person getting this huge amount of money? And Doug Egan, the president of the company at the time, responded, let Kelly do his job. End of discussion. And she continued to get money for 3.5 years. So, we are encouraging the U.S. Attorney's Office to retry Kelly. Clearly, they believed he was guilty, and they argued that he was guilty, and the evidence shows that he actually is guilty. And I'll talk a little bit about why I think the jury went the other way on that. But if they really believe that he was guilty, then they must retry Kelly, because the public deserves that accountability and deserves justice in that respect. And I echo Michael's call for Attorney General Schneiderman to begin investigating. We also call on our state legislature to hold legislative hearings, oversight hearings on what transpired. They have that authority. No more excuses from anybody. Talk is cheap. We need action now. We're also calling on Basil Sagos and Basil Sagos, of the Commissioner of the DEC, and Howard Zucker, Commissioner of Department of Health, to begin evaluation and investigation of this project, and to urge Governor Cuomo to pull the permits immediately. One of the things the trial showed was how controlled all of these regulatory agencies were by the second floor. And that is improper. Regulatory agencies must be independent because they have the responsibility to safeguard the public interest. And they have oversight over critical things like air and water. When your air is polluted, when your water is polluted, it invades your home, it doesn't ask you if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Green Party person or a Bernie-crat. We're all in this together, and we have to fight for our county. We have a beautiful county. We have to fight for our citizens, those who know and those who may not know. They deserve better. We deserve better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One other point that should be made. I had the opportunity to read the Court of Appeals decision involving FERC and the DEC. The newspaper did a report on it, which was an accurate report, I thought. But let me just make a brief comment as an attorney about that decision and the reasoning of the decision. For those of you who don't know, the issue is whether the DEC maintained regulatory authority over CPV with regard to the issuance of certain permits. The company argued that the DEC had essentially waived that authority and jurisdiction by being too dilatory in review of the CPV application. Well, that's the context we're in. We're dealing with statutory interpretation, and the Court of Appeals, as the newspaper article correctly notes, says that the statute doesn't say that the DEC's year commences with a complete application. It just commences when the applicant makes a request for the permit. Now, I've read hundreds of Court of Appeals decisions. I've argued hundreds of times in the U.S. Court of Appeals. And quite honestly, to my way of thinking, that is about the weakest reasoning I have ever read. Because this is what it entails. You are an applicant, and it invites, it doesn't just entail. You are an applicant, and you make a submission, and you say, I want a permit. You don't submit anything. You don't submit anything. I want a permit. Here's my request. And the DEC says, well, you have to fill out X and Y and Z. And the applicant says, all right. And 10 months later, the applicant submits whatever it wants to submit to the DEC. Are you really telling me the DEC has 2 months? What happens if the applicant submits it 11 months and 23 days later? The illogic of this approach is mind-boggling. And to pick up on Pramilla's point, with regard to the regulatory structure, for it to have any integrity and credibility, it has to be able to say to an applicant, we're not even beginning until we get a complete application. Because if it doesn't have that authority, what authority does it have? The applicant's saying, no, I made my request. I'm running my year out. And if you don't do something, well, then the DEC, I guess, could deny in that period of time. So really what the Court of Appeals is saying to the DEC is, you should have denied this Don't ask them for any more information. If it was incomplete, just deny it. Okay? So I think that decision leaves a lot, especially in light of FERC and what we know about FERC and its rubber stampism. It leaves a lot to be desired. But what it really leaves to be desired is what we've been talking about. Again, a lack of real review. So DEC was supposed to do a real review. They didn't really finish their review. Now FERC didn't really do a review. So what about the public? Who's doing the review? Nobody. This is the problem with these technical legal arguments. They disserve the public interest. All right, are there any questions from anyone here? There may be people who also want to make comments, which you're invited to do, but let's ask the media if anybody has anything they want to find out.
What's your next step?
Well, our next step is to do what we have been doing, which is to continue to put as much political pressure on those in authority as we can, to tell them and the rest of the community that they have certain powers and responsibilities that they may not apparently know they have, and to match their words with deeds. That's what we need now, as has been pointed out. We're not in a position anymore where maybe this, maybe that, next year. No, not next year, now. We are investigating the issue of a private lawsuit, but again, I don't want the buck always to stop here. It's not fair. It's really not. The point is there are many people who've been negatively affected, as Pramilla began to outline. Many of them have filled out forms. Many of them have made clear the negative health impacts on them and their family. This is an ongoing nuisance. It's a public nuisance. And as such, it should be enjoined. The first effort at that, in my opinion, should be by government, because government represents all the people. If I bring a lawsuit on behalf of 22 people, that's not the same as the government coming to court and saying, this should not happen now in our county. We woke up, it shouldn't happen now in our county because it is a public nuisance. So we have to wait a little while to see if that's going to happen, if those in power are going to take the mantle and do something. They may not.
What kind of case can and should the county executive bring?
Well, the case is a case that's based on a nuisance theory. The county executive has parents patriae authority on behalf of the citizens of the county to enjoin or try to enjoin a public nuisance. And despite the idea that this company says it's operating only with its permits, it's only doing this, it's only doing that, we know, for instance, as far as I know, it didn't have a permit to operate with the kind of fuel it operated with in that time period. It had no permit for that. It had a permit for something else. The other point is obvious. And I'll illustrate it this way. Everybody here knows what Altori is. Altori is a landfill on 17M. When Altori was being sold, Orange Environment, which was then functional, but it's not really functional anymore, brought a challenge to the moral capacity of the buyer to properly operate that facility. And if you go back in the annals, you will see that there was a hearing, and that the end result of the hearing was that the moral capacity of that buyer was not sustained. Okay? Now, when you talk about public trust, and that's what the county executive and his county attorney should be focused on, you now have a company which has been convicted of attempting to, and successfully to some extent, prostitute the regulatory process. I think a court should decide whether in that context we can trust CPV to operate. And I think that's an issue the county should be raising in a court of competent jurisdiction. I think there are two issues. One is, you've supplied all this data, but we know now that you didn't have confidence in that data. How do we know that? Why would you be paying all this money if you thought on the merits you had something to say? That has to be asked and answered. The citizens who are here have some resources and have expended enormous resources in opposing this project and other projects, bird brain projects, which are ruining the county. Okay? There are people here from several different causes as their primary issue. But there's a limit to what individual people and even groups of people can do. Maybe there is no limit. We'll see. But in a way, this is the function of government. It's to represent all of the people's interests and to discern which interests are primary. And as Pramilla correctly said, the interest that's primary is an interest in public health and safety and an interest in the integrity of our process. You cannot assure public health and safety without a process that has integrity. And this process has plainly lacked integrity. That's been adjudicated. So, yes, what can the county do? The other thing the county can do through the county executive is to be in Albany. You know, Albany's less than 2 hours from Goshen. It takes me about an hour and a half. Let's say he drives a little more slowly, an hour 45 minutes. You go to Albany and you demand a meeting with the governor and Basil and whoever else you want to meet with, and you lay out the case for the county. Because that's really what it is. You're an advocate. The county executive is the chief advocate for our county. Now, he views chief advocacy as bringing in all these dirty businesses. That's not the chief advocacy role. The chief advocacy role is protecting the health and safety of people already here. That's how I view it. The other part we haven't talked about, of course, is our congressman. Because our congressman has steadfastly supported the project as a bridge to the future, a 40-year bridge to the future. A totally discredited technology, which has to be replaced by renewables. And this is what the gentleman says. So that has to be challenged. Just has to be challenged. Because, again, he's in Washington. He should be dealing with FERC on behalf of us. Mm-hmm. His office should be advocating. He should be intervening. If you're in Congress, there's nothing that prevents you from intervening in a proceeding and saying, this is in my neck of the woods, and it's terrible for us. However you dress it up, that's the bottom line here. It's in our neck of the woods, and it's terrible for us. And there's been an insufficient review process at FERC. So I hope the DEC goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. That was the point of my comments about FERC. The DEC has the ability to go to the Supreme Court of the United States and say, we're dealing here with statutory interpretation, which is what the Supreme Court of the United States is supposed to be supervening. And the statutory interpretation that Second Circuit is given is, frankly, doesn't work. It's not consistent with the statute. The statute doesn't mean you make a request and then you don't have to make a submission and there's a year.
Please.
Pramilla, you sat in court daily
Yes.
during the trial. We know that Percoco was found guilty of accepting bribes from several companies with business in New York State. But what is CPV's role specifically? So what was he found to have accepted from that CPV executive?
He was convicted of soliciting bribes from a CPV. So when he requested in an email, I need 7,500 boxes of ZD, the jury found him guilty of soliciting bribes. What they didn't seem to agree on, and they were deadlocked on this issue, is whether Braith Kelly, the CPV executive, understood that he was giving bribes. But I would argue that there was a lot of evidence that the prosecutors really didn't have when they presented this case. One of these, the defense's theory on, so it came down for the jurors, what was the purpose of this job that Lisa Percoco had, that she was getting $90,000 a year for? And the defense's theory was that CPV created this CPV Educates program in order to quell opposition in the Hudson Valley, which is here, for this project. Now, the scheme, the agreement, and the job began in fall of 2012. But there was no opposition against the CPV Valley power plant in 2012, in fall of 2012, because we didn't know about it. We repeatedly asked the planning board and the town board, and they said, oh, it's not happening, it's not moving forward, don't worry about it, it's dead. So there wasn't really an opposition. So why didn't, if that was the purpose of the program, why didn't they implement it in the Hudson Valley? And the other thing is that where they ended up implementing it is in Woodbridge, New Jersey, where they had no opposition. And the reason they had no opposition is because that project was built actually on a Superfund site. So everybody was happy that CPV was coming in and cleaning it. You know, so there wasn't opposition in Woodbridge. So what was the real purpose of this job? You know, again, if you combine those facts, which the jury did not know, with the evidence that was actually presented, the fact that when she was eventually replaced, she was replaced by somebody who got like $100 per diem, $100 per an appearance. Now she worked about 3 to 4 hours a month. Now, what's important is that when jury selection was taking place, the defense immediately rejected all teachers from the jury pool because they didn't want somebody to understand what it really takes to create the kind of curriculum that Lisa Percoco allegedly created. They also dismissed any. There was one juror who said that he was opposed to fracking, and even though for the last 5 years we've been told, "Oh, it has nothing to do with fracking. We're not interested. This power plant has nothing to do with fracking or frack gas," they immediately, instantly jumped on this one juror who said he was opposed to fracking, and the judge was like, "I didn't know we were going to be talking about fracking here." So all of these things are, there's a backstory and a context to all of this. I think the prosecution, unfortunately, really didn't understand the complexity of the environmental review process. I think that would have helped them tremendously, but we're really urging them to retry this case. That dig a little deeper. There's a lot more evidence there, and the people deserve justice, and they deserve transparency and accountability. Braith Kelly is, if you look at where this power plant has been built in other communities across the country, Connecticut, California, they attempted it in Massachusetts, Maryland, Pennsylvania, you'll see a lot of similarities, a lot of similar allegations of backdoor dealing, strong-arm tactics. So, there's a strong evidence that this is how this company operates.
All right, any other questions that anybody has? Yes.
What about the eagle, trespassing on the eagle boundary and being within the path of an eagle's nest? And is something going to be done? Is there going to be criminal action taken against the so-called eagle expert who ignored that there actually was an active eagle nest along the pipeline that they were laying?
Well, just so you understand, we can't take criminal action.
No, not us, but can we ask Steve Newhouse, please
Mr.
come out
Hoovler,
and take a look at this?
I think that the request should go to David Hoovler. He's the Orange County District Attorney, and I think he could be asked about that. But we don't have control over that directly.
Right.
And go ahead about the eagle.
Yeah, I would point out that the eagles are there. We've been documenting them. We don't know if they've laid an egg or not yet, but they are definitely in the nest on an ongoing basis, more and more so every week that goes by. And the DEC, along with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, has full authority immediately to shut down the disturbance of the eagle, which is a violation of the Federal Bald and Golden Eagle Act. And that still is in effect. So again, we see a pattern here, a lack of political will or a lack of regulatory will to enforce the environmental protections we all know exist. It is bewildering, and it's, again, another red flag. And it's time for all of the regulatory agencies and the governor to step up and do the right thing. The Eagles deserve justice. The people of Orange County deserve justice. And I would remind everyone that Governor Cuomo has full executive authority to immediately pull the plug on this project. The DEC has full authority to rescind the permits. It's written in the first paragraph of the permits that they have the authority to rescind the permits if there's any new information, misinformation, fraud, deception, for any number of reasons. They have a broad spectrum of reasons for which they could revoke it.
I think the only inference that you could fairly draw from the fact that they haven't done it is that they knew about the corruption all along.
As I say,
not new information to them, right?
Yeah, it's hard to believe the governor didn't know. We're not here to place blame. We need him to step up and do the right thing. He took an oath of office, a commitment to safeguard the public interest, and now we demand he do it.
Hi, Pramilla. Yes, I have a clarification question to ask you, and it was regarding the fact that you wanted the regulatory agencies to be independent and to be doing their job. And you made one comment that was not happening because it looked like it was being controlled by the second floor. Can you illuminate us about what is the second floor? What is that reference?
The second floor is the executive chamber. And it was part of Todd Howe's testimony that, in previous administrations, the Public Service Commission was a relatively independent agency. But under the Cuomo administration, they were frustrated because when he assumed office in 2010, the current commissioner was not so compliant and acquiescent to the second floor. And Todd Howe suggested that the reason the chairperson was changed was because of that fact. So, and definitely if you look at the emails, like these private meetings that that occurred when Kelly demanded them. You know, Kelly sent an urgent email saying we need to have an email with we need to have a meeting with all of the state officials. And immediately, you know, Howard Glazer, Joe Martens, they were all called together. Aubrey Zibelman were all called together in a room. We need a complete overhaul of our ethics laws in Albany, because, you know, a lot of elected officials kind of, you know, kind of rely on this really bright, firm line that exists between what's legal and illegal in a criminal proceeding. But that line quickly fades away in the court of public opinion. And so we need better public disclosure laws. We need, you know, I don't believe a company that is doing business before the state, certainly on a matter as critical as a power plant project, should be allowed to donate to elected officials that would have oversight over that project. So I think we need a lot of changes in Albany, but the governor can start right now by delivering justice to the people of Orange County, pulling the plug, rescinding the permits. That is the only thing that he can do right now to obtain any bit of credibility.
Because otherwise, there seemed like there was undue influence by that second floor.
Right. There's definitely evidence of undue influence. And there are a couple of, I would like Joan Terrell, because she's from Warwick, to come and talk about the impact that you had.
Should I stand right
Yeah, you can stand. You can sit over here.
Okay. Yes, I'm from Warwick, New York, 9.5 miles from the plant as the crow flies. And my name is Joan Terrell, but I have to tell you, as of late January, when I started smelling these toxic fumes that were invading my home, I think especially to the state, county, local, and our federal representation, I and my neighbors go by a different name, and that's collateral damage. Clearly there was a devilish bargain. The Percoco trial has revealed the tip of the iceberg, if you will, a devilish bargain to sell our health, our public safety, our welfare, and the futures of our children and our inheritors for money, to put money in somebody's pocket and to make a big splashy deal that would advance personal financial gain for people who have no interest whatsoever in our welfare. And what's so enraging is that our public officials, who were voted by us and in whom we put, as Americans do in the voting system, whom we put our ultimate trust to uphold their oath of office, to protect the very essential requirements of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, sold it away blithely and secretly and out from under us. And so what I've smelled on about half a dozen occasions at different times when I've come and gone from my home, but particularly on 3 occasions in the morning, I awoke at 9.5 miles away to a splitting head and some metallic chemical something in my sinuses. And there was a faint smell in my home, but I went to my front door and I opened it, and it was like an airplane had crashed in my backyard. What's so horrifying is not only what it does to me personally, obviously, and my family, but I live in a block with about a dozen kids, 2 newborns, a whole bunch of toddlers and high schoolers, and I'm just one little blip, one little block. And I'm wondering, you know, I'm seriously worried about what that experience and this exposure is going to mean to them. You know, bad enough me as an adult, but to them this is just an obscenity. And they're my kids. They're all our kids. Just like our forebears fought to keep this beautiful environment in Orange County as pristine and lovely and attractive as it is, and they gifted it to us, we have to gift it forward. And so if our public officials are at odds with that goal, then we have to fight them with everything we've got until it's changed. And I think that's where we residents are, and we thank Michael and Pramilla and the other heroes like Maddie, who got in this early, sounded the alarm, and fought from the beginning. And we're with them, and we're with all of our kids. And I just don't want to smell this anymore because I won't be able to grow my own vegetables, go to the Warwick Farmers Market, enjoy the out of doors as I do, hiking. Everything that's a gift to us is being stolen. They have to give it back to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Mary, you wanted to say something, right?
Just a very short
brief, but you can say it.
episode that happened at the meeting at the Walk Hill Town Hall, which says it all to me. We had a doctor there, and we had several parents there, and the mother said, what do I do about my children? And the doctor said, well, when the black smoke is going on, don't let their children go out. Shut the doors. She said, but when the other gas fumes come through, we won't see it, we won't smell it. How do I know when it's safe for my child to go out and play? And that says it to me in a nutshell. For money. And they should never be allowed to open. Never.
Thank you, Mary. All right, does anybody have any other questions about Greg? You want to say something?
Yeah,
Go ahead. And Sam?
Okay, I'm going to say as a resident of Way Beyond, and I've been there in New Hampton for 2 years, and now in the Ridgebury area. I live about a mile from this as the crow flies.
2 years you lived there? 2 years?
New Hampton.
Oh,
42 years.
42
Wow.
years.
42 years.
All right, 42.
2 years in New Hampton and 42
40.
years in Ridgebury. And I see the town of Way Beyond board doesn't realize how exposed they are when somebody talks from Warwick, somebody talks from Goshen, a lot of people are talking from Middletown. There is a possibility of an extensive lawsuit that might bankrupt our town of 7,000 residents. They acted, irresponsible, and I think what you said earlier about Eric Snyderman coming down, he needs to come down and check this problem that's going on.
What's your last name, Jim?
Winter.
Greg Winter. Sir,
Have you been in touch with the EPA also?
what EPA?
Yeah.
Environmental Protection?
No, I mean, there isn't really an EPA
They
anymore.
don't exist.
So most of the regulations which the EPA promulgated to deal with issues like this have been rescinded by Mr. Pruitt and others. So we're not, see, this is the thing, we don't have time to spin wheels with people we know, hello Russ, are ineffectual. We know the Trump administration on these issues. We already get that. We don't have to waste time there. We know FERC already. We have local people. That's a federal level EPA. Local people, state people, county people who can effectually respond in light, in part, of the federal government's attitude toward corporate America, which is whatever they want's fine. We understand that. We're not even talking about that. There's nothing to talk about. We're blowing at windmills. Forget them. We're talking about people who say, now Mr. Newhouse in May of 2014 avidly supported this project. There's a letter that he and DeStefano signed that Jess shared last week. We all have that letter now, which is very clear. Let them do whatever they want to do. This is a great thing for our county. We are a bunch of eco-terrorists and whatever else.
It's a game changer.
If you think there are eco-terrorists, by the way, if you think there are eco-terrorists around, why do you put a plant on Route 84, 150 feet from Route 84, where anybody can stop with a bazooka, and that would be the end of all of us because of the ammonia there? So you got to wonder. But the point is, we have to call on those people who now say, whatever they said in 2014, we oppose this. The Newhouse now, he opposes this. The permits should be pulled. The governor, I oppose fracking, December 2014. He opposes fracking. He doesn't, it's questionable for public health and safety. Use of fracked natural gas, development of it. Okay, this is their position. So be consistent. Do something.
Do you happen to have doctors who met with some of the
Yes.
residents who basically have medical records that say the plant is to blame for their health?
Yes, because there have been now, see, this is part of the problem. This use of fracked natural gas really started in earnest in the late 2000s. And there wasn't a literature in 2008 and 2009. Now, as was pointed out the other night at the meeting in the town of Wallkill, there are more than 1,000 refereed journal articles detailing the health effects of the exploitation, the distribution, and the use of this substance. And those, as I pointed out to the second department in October when I argued unsuccessfully down there, they have never been scrutinized. This project's never been scrutinized in light of that literature. That's why we asked for a supplemental environmental impact study in 2015. Exactly for that reason. Because it hadn't been done. And the science now is catching up to the technology. So yeah, there are doctors, as
Yeah.
Pramilla pointed out earlier.
But I would say it's unfair to make all of Orange County a guinea pig. We don't accept that. We don't accept that for our children. The science is there. There's enough science to warrant shutting down the plant. And the bottom line is, if you've got residents, hundreds of residents from around the county, from 9-10 miles away, having burning eyes and sore throat, that's a health impact. That's a health impact. And the state and the county have police powers to invoke, to the Department of Health has police powers to shut down any facility that poses a health risk to the general public.
Jess and then Sam. I know Sam has something.
Is there any air testing going on, or has there been any air testing going on by any of our politicians, any results or any active air testing that we know of to date?
Not,
Yes is no.
no.
Sam
not-
wanted to say
Yeah,
something.
you did mention something that there is a question about the location of it and safety of the location. In the primary evaluation of the plant, I know there's a statute from State Homeland Security that has a requirement for base infrastructure review, surveys,
Regulation.
regulations. Was that ever part of the initial planning? Anyone to speak? Has
You
anything
actually, 2 or 3 weeks ago showed me the Homeland Security regulations, which require what amount a security audit for any new power plant in the United States, not just in Orange County or New York State, because of a concern that these plants are vulnerable, contain a lot of toxic chemicals and substances, and one wants to be as sure as possible that no one can do harm to the overall population residing proximate to the facility. I have looked, and I know you've foiled something, I've looked through the records we have, which are pretty voluminous, and I see no reference to any security audit. I think you foiled it, didn't you?
Nothing's returned of yet. That's why I'm asking the question. I see no report done anywhere for a site survey.
I don't see it
Homeland
either.
Security.
So hopefully your FOIL will reveal what's been done, if anything. I know that a lot of it was done in secret in New York State. They had meetings about the project, which they couldn't reveal to us, security-related meetings supposedly, because if they revealed them publicly, it would compromise. There was a whole issue about that. Now, what they did, what their findings are, how they ever allowed this to be placed where it's placed. The placement in itself, even if it was a quote-unquote safe project, and it didn't have all these environmental effects, but still had the chemical fortress which it has there, it's in the wrong place. Why it was allowed, who could ever answer that question? Look at it. We're talking about terrorism. Every day, that's what we talk about. You stop a car there, you have something in your car, and 20 seconds later, the plant's blown up. Literally. Mm-hmm. Not to invite anybody to do it, but it's obvious it's a public health hazard where it's situated. You don't put it there. You put it somewhere isolated where you have a security perimeter that you can patrol and control. Right. Now, that doesn't make it fail-safe. You could still attack that if you wanted to, and you devised a more sophisticated means. But right now, any idiot can come along and do anything to us.
That's right. And that issue was raised in 2009, by the way, and ignored by every jurisdictional agency. And the public has the right to the safety emergency response plan. As Jess Goki says, people have the right to know where the emergency exits are before the plane takes off. And again, I'm quoting her.
All right. Anyone else want to make any kind of statement or have any questions? If not, we're going to, yes?
Is there a place that the public can get in touch if they're concerned about this and this is the first time they're hearing about the plant?
I think that if people are having health issues, you should explain that there is a form that we're asking people to fill out. And where is it available?
On the website, protectorangecounty.org, there's a health form. Please fill that out. If you've had any impacts, you can retroactively try to track back the dates. And we've been recording the dates in which the plant was operating. So if you recall having sudden health impacts, please fill out that form. Even if you've experienced noise or noxious fumes, these are all considered, or even if the plume kind of, invaded your view shed, these are all considered nuisance impacts. So please fill out that form. We're also planning to distribute air monitors all around the county. If you want an air monitor, there's also a form on our website to get an air monitor. But it really shouldn't come to this. The responsibility should not be put on the residents of Orange County to live this way. We shouldn't have to monitor our air on a daily basis. We shouldn't have to constantly be monitoring our children's health and wondering whether, what my child is breathing is going to cause cancer 10 years down the road. That's an unfair way for us to live. This project needs to be shut down. And I also remind everybody, this is, a huge agricultural economy, Orange County, where, 3 large Class 2 protected agricultural districts right where that plant is sited. And again, this should never have been sited in a residential area, never been sited on wetlands, never been sited next to an environmental justice community. It should never been sited on protected farmlands and wetlands and in an agricultural district. It was wrong from day one, and it's time to shut it down.
It's down the road from a school too.
And